Students, in today's class, let's discuss the poem A Photograph, which is written by Shirley Tolson. The poem A Photograph is written as a tribute to the poet's mother. Now, let's discuss the poem and the literary devices. The cardboard shows me how it was when the two girl cousins went paddling, each one holding one of my mother's hands, and she, the big girl, some 12 years or so. Cardboard, which means very stiff paper board on which a photo is pasted. Paddling, which means walking with bare feet in shallow water. Here, in these lines, the poet describes that she is looking at the old photograph of her mother's, where the two girl cousins and the poet's mother are walking on the beach with bare feet holding each other's hands. The girl in the middle is the poet's mother, and she's 12 years when the photo is taken. That is, the poet's mother is the taller and the elder one in the photo. All three stood still to smile through their hair at the uncle with the camera. A sweet face, my mother's, that was before I was born, and the sea, which appears to have changed, washed their terribly transient feet. Transient, which means lost only for a short time or temporary, something which lost for a short time. Here in these lines, the poet describes how the three girls posed with their wet hair left free and smiled through the free hair at the camera when the mother's uncle was taking the photo. Here, the poet describes that her mother's face is a sweet one, sweet face, and the photo was taken before the poet was born. The poet here compares the sea and their feet. The poet says that their feet terribly transient, which is the feet were grown older, whereas the poet says that the sea has not changed. The literary device present in this stanza is alliteration. The examples of alliteration are stood still, through their, my mother, terribly transient. These are the examples of alliteration. Alliteration, which means the repetition of a consonant sound at the beginning of two or more consecutive words. Children, you can see the examples. Stood still, the word which has started with the same sound. S, s. Through there, the letter has started with the same sound. My mother, and same, terribly transient. Some 20-30 years later, she would laugh at the snapshot. See Betty and Dolly, she would say, and look how they dressed us for the beach. The sea holiday was her past, mine is her laughter, both wry with the labored ease of loss. Snapshot, which means a photograph. Wry, which means getting disappointed. Labored, which means done with great effort or difficulty. Here, in these lines, the poet says that seeing the photograph after some 20 or 30 years, her mother would laugh and comment at how Betty and Dolly, that is, the mother's cousins, have dressed up for beach. The poet also recalls the sea holiday was her mother's favorite moment from the past, while the poet's favorite moment was her mother's laughter. Both the poet and her mother's past memories would get pass away. The literary device present here in these lines, it is oxymoron. The word labored is in the stanza is an example of the literary device oxymoron. Oxymoron, which means a term which contradicts itself, that is, two words used together to have opposite meanings. Here the word labored is, which means labored, great difficulty. The word ease means comfort. So, two opposite meaning which has combined together to give another word, labored ease. Also, some other examples we can see is cruel kindness, living death, the same difference. So these are some of the examples of oxymoron. Oxymoron are the words or the two words used together to have opposite meaning. Now, she has been dead nearly as many years as that girl lived. And of this circumstance, there is nothing to say at all. Its silence silences. Circumstance, which means a state or condition. Silences, which means a complete absence of sound. Here, in these lines, the poet describes that her mother died 12 years ago, the same age her mother had taken the photo. Whenever the poet thinks of her mother's death, she finds it very difficult to explain and find it very sad because death has silenced her mother, which has also left the poet speechless. The literary device again we have in this stanza is alliteration. Example of alliteration here is silence silences. Already we have seen that the repetition of consonant sounds. Here the word silence silences has started with the sound s, s, that is the sound of yes. That's why we call it as alliteration.